The white roses in my bouquet had started to wilt in the June heat, their edges browning like burnt paper. I should have taken it as an omen. Instead, I stood in the bride's suite of the Meridian Grand Hotel, watching my reflection in the floor-length mirror, wondering if the tightness in my chest was normal wedding day nerves or something darker trying to claw its way to the surface. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My dress was perfect. Vera Wang, custom-fitted with delicate lace sleeves that my mother had insisted made me look like royalty. The price tag had been obscene, but Marcus had waved it away with his usual casual dismissal of money. "Nothing but the best for my queen," he'd said, kissing my forehead in that way that used to make me feel cherished but lately just felt possessive. "You look absolutely radiant." "Claire," my sister Rachel said from behind me, adjusting the cathedral train for the 100th time. Her smile was tight, forced. We both knew what she really wanted to say, what she'd been trying to say for the past 6 months. "Don't do this. He's not who you think he is." But the invitations were sent, the deposits paid, and 300 guests were already filing into the grand ballroom downstairs. 300 witnesses to what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I touched the diamond necklace at my throat. Marcus's wedding gift to me, presented last night at the rehearsal dinner with theatrical flourish. 18 carats, he'd announced to thunderous applause, as if the value of the gems could somehow quantify his love. The stones felt cold against my skin, heavy. Like a collar. "5 minutes, Miss Hartley," called the wedding coordinator through the door, her voice bright with professional enthusiasm. "Miss Hartley. In 5 minutes I'd be Mrs. Marcus Thorne." Mrs. Marcus Thorne, wife of the golden boy of Chicago's financial district, the man who'd swept me off my feet 2 years ago at a charity auction where I'd been working as an event planner. He'd bid an obscene amount on a weekend in Napa Valley, then asked if I'd join him. I'd laughed, charmed by his confidence, his easy smile, the way he made me feel like I was the only woman in a room full of Chicago's elite. The first 6 months had been a fairy tale. Flowers delivered to my tiny apartment, surprise weekend getaways, dinners at restaurants I'd only read about in magazines. He'd listened when I talked about my dreams of starting my own event planning company, encouraged me when I doubted myself, held me when the stress of my demanding job at prestige events threatened to break me. The change had been gradual. So subtle I'd convinced myself I was imagining it. The way he'd started checking my phone, casually at first, then with increasing frequency. The comments about my clothes, "Is that what you're wearing? I thought you'd want to look more elegant," for my colleagues. The isolation, gentle but persistent, from my friends. "They're not really on our level, sweetheart. Don't you want to surround yourself with people who can help you grow?" I'd ignored the red flags, painted them green in my mind because Marcus Thorne was supposed to be my salvation. After years of struggling, of watching my event planning career stagnate while I worked for other people's visions, Marcus represented security, stability, a chance to finally breathe. His connections had already landed me 3 major clients. His name opened doors I'd been knocking on for years. What would I be without him? The question whispered through my mind like poison. Rachel's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Claire, it's not too late. We can walk out the side entrance right now. I have my car. We can just go." I met her eyes in the mirror. She knew. Somehow, she knew about the argument last week, when Marcus had grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave bruises I'd covered with concealer. She knew about the way he spoke to me when we were alone, his voice dripping with condescension that somehow never appeared in public. She knew because she'd been watching, waiting for me to admit what I'd been denying. "I'm fine," I whispered, the lie tasting bitter. "Just nervous." "Claire." I said, "I'm fine, Rachel." The door opened and my mother swept in, resplendent in pale blue silk, her face glowing with satisfaction. This wedding was her masterpiece, her crowning achievement as a mother. For months, she'd practically floated through life, bragging to anyone who'd listen about her daughter marrying Marcus Thorne, heir to the Thorne financial empire. Never mind that I'd built my own career, earned my own successes. In her eyes, catching Marcus was my greatest accomplishment. "Oh, darling, you're a vision," she breathed, tears glittering in her eyes. "Marcus is going to die when he sees you. His mother just told me he's beside himself with anticipation. Such a good man, so devoted to you." Rachel made a sound that might have been a cough or might have been something else entirely. My mother shot her a sharp look. "The processional is starting," Mom continued, ignoring Rachel's obvious discomfort. "Your father is waiting at the bottom of the stairs." "Ready, sweetheart?" "No." The word screamed through my mind but died before it reached my lips. I nodded instead, my neck stiff beneath the weight of those cold diamonds. Rachel handed me my bouquet, her fingers lingering on mine for just a moment, her eyes pleading one last time. The walk through the hotel corridor felt like a death march. My heels clicked against marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than my first apartment. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across walls covered in silk damask. The Meridian Grand was Marcus's choice, of course. Everything about this wedding had been Marcus's choice, disguised as mutual decisions, but always, somehow, ending up exactly as he wanted. My father waited at the top of the grand staircase, distinguished in his tuxedo, his face creased with pride and something else I couldn't quite name. Worry, doubt. But he smiled when he saw me, offering his arm with the formal stiffness that had always characterized our relationship. "You look beautiful." "Claire Bear," he said, using the childhood nickname that made me suddenly want to cry. When was the last time he'd called me that? "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. My father, ever practical, ever focused on logic and reason over emotion, didn't usually traffic in feelings. I opened my mouth to give him the expected answer, but something in his expression stopped me. He knew. Somehow, like Rachel, he knew. "Dad, Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The wedding march began, the familiar notes swelling from the ballroom below. My father's grip on my arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "If you're not sure, Claire, we can turn around right now. I'll handle everything. Your mother will forgive us eventually, and the rest? None of it matters. Only you matter." For a moment, I teetered on the edge of confession, of collapse, of calling this whole thing off. But then I thought about the contracts I'd signed for my new business, the office space I'd leased with Marcus as my guarantor, the clients who'd come to me specifically because of my connection to the Thorne name. I thought about starting over at 32, rebuilding from nothing, facing the pitying looks and whispered gossip. I thought about how much easier it would be to just go through with it. I'm sure. "Dad, let's go." We descended the stairs, and with each step, I felt pieces of myself falling away, left behind on the marble like breadcrumbs I'd never follow back. The doors to the ballroom stood open, revealing 300 upturned faces, all watching, waiting, judging. The aisle stretched before me like an impossible distance, lined with more white roses and flickering candles and expectation. And at the end, bathed in golden light from the windows behind him, stood Marcus. He was devastatingly handsome in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his practiced smile radiating confidence and charm. This was the Marcus the world saw. Successful, charismatic, generous. The man who donated to children's hospitals and served on charity boards. The man who'd been named one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors before sweeping me off my feet. Not the man who'd called me stupid for forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. Not the man who'd systematically isolated me from everyone who might question his treatment of me. Not the man who'd looked at me with such cold fury last week that I'd actually feared for my safety. The processional seemed to last both seconds and hours. Faces blurred past. My college roommate Sarah looking concerned. Marcus's business partner Derek, smirking in that way that always made my skin crawl. My boss from Prestige Events, probably calculating how my marriage would benefit the company. Marcus's mother Patricia, regal and rigid, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She'd never liked me. I wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right pedigree. But Marcus had insisted, and Patricia Thorne had learned long ago that her son always got what he wanted. Then I was there, standing beside Marcus, my father's hand leaving my arm as he symbolically gave me away. The phrase suddenly struck me as horrifyingly accurate. Given away like property, like a possession to be transferred from one owner to another. Marcus took my hand, his grip tight enough to hurt, though his smile never wavered. "You're late," he whispered through his teeth, still smiling for the guests. "You were supposed to be here 3 minutes ago. I'm sorry, We'll discuss it later." The promise in those words sent ice through my veins. Reverend Matthews began the ceremony, his voice resonating through the ballroom with practiced authority. I'd met with him twice for pre-marriage counseling, sessions where Marcus had performed beautifully, saying all the right things about partnership and respect and love. The Reverend had seemed satisfied, even pleased. He had no idea what happened behind closed doors, did anyone? The ceremony proceeded like a script I'd memorized but no longer understood. We lit the unity candle. We exchanged rings, mine a platinum band with diamonds that matched my necklace, his a simple gold band he'd probably remove the moment we left the reception. Marcus read his vows from memory, his voice thick with emotion that seemed genuine enough to draw actual tears from several guests. My turn came. I'd written my vows weeks ago, pages of heartfelt promises and dreams for our future. But as I looked at Marcus, at the subtle warning in his eyes that told me to perform well, to not embarrass him, something inside me fractured. "Marcus," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "2 years ago you came into my life and changed everything. You showed me a world I'd never imagined, introduced me to people and places and possibilities I'd only dreamed about. You taught me so much about myself, about what I'm capable of enduring." His grip on my hands tightened, a clear warning. I was going off script. "And about the difference between love and possession." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere I'd kept locked away. "You taught me that diamonds can feel like chains, that devotion can look like control, and that sometimes the person you think will save you is actually the one you need saving from." The ballroom had gone deadly silent. Marcus's smile remained frozen on his face, but his eyes had gone cold. Dangerous. Out of the corner of my vision, I could see Reverend Matthews looking confused, uncertain whether this was part of some modern vow structure he wasn't familiar with. "Claire," Marcus said quietly, his voice silk over steel. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "I'm telling everyone here what you've been teaching me for months. That I'm not good enough, that I'm stupid, that I'm lucky to have you because no one else would want me, that my success is only because of your name, your connections, your generosity." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I could see my mother's face draining of color, my father rising from his seat. But I couldn't stop now. The dam had broken, and 2 years of silence came flooding out. I'm telling them about the bruises I cover with makeup, the friends I've lost because you convinced me they were toxic, the career I've built that you take credit for, the woman I used to be before you systematically dismantled her piece by piece. That's enough. Marcus's voice was low, deadly. The mask was slipping now, revealing the fury beneath. "You're being hysterical. The stress of the day, don't." I pulled my hands from his grasp. "Don't you dare tell me I'm hysterical. Don't you dare gaslight me in front of 300 witnesses." He moved so fast I barely registered it. One moment he was standing there. The next his hand connected with my face with a crack that echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. The force of it sent me stumbling backward, my bouquet falling to the floor, white roses scattering across the altar. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. I could taste blood where my lip had split against my teeth. My cheek burned, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the clarity that came with it. Marcus had just shown everyone exactly who he was. His face had gone pale, realization dawning as he understood what he'd done, where he'd done it, who had witnessed it. 300 people sat in stunned silence, their phones out. Of course, they had their phones out. This was a society wedding. Everyone documenting every moment for social media. They'd all just documented his assault. Claire. He started, reaching for me. I stepped back, my hand going to my burning cheek. Blood trickled down my chin, staining the white lace of my dress. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been so worried about the roses wilting, never imagining the entire wedding would be stained with something far worse. But instead of crumbling, instead of crying or running away, I felt something else rising inside me. Not fear, not shame. Something harder, colder, sharper, power, because Marcus Thorne had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd revealed himself publicly, irrevocably, to everyone who mattered in his carefully constructed world. And I, Claire Hartley, was about to make sure he understood exactly what that revelation would cost him. I straightened, wiped the blood from my chin, and smiled. Not a victim's smile, not a frightened woman's smile. A smile that came from somewhere deep and dark and absolutely done with being Marcus Thorne's possession. "Thank you," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the silent ballroom. "Thank you for finally showing everyone what I've been living with. What I've been hiding. What I've been too ashamed and too afraid to admit, Claire." "Please, let me explain." His voice cracked, panic creeping in as he realized his perfect image was shattering in real time. "Explain what, Marcus? Explain how you lost control for just a moment? How the stress got to you? How I provoked you?" I laughed, a sound without humor. "That's what you told me last week when you grabbed my wrist, remember? That I'd provoked you by questioning where you'd been until 3 a.m. More murmurs from the crowd. Marcus's business partner Derek had gone very still, his expression calculating. Patricia Thorne looked ready to faint. My mother had her face in her hands. But my father was moving forward, his face set with barely controlled rage. "Don't!" I said, holding up a hand to stop him. "This is mine to handle." I turned back to Marcus, who stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "You wanted to know what I'm capable of? Let me show you. Let me show everyone." I reached into my bouquet holder, the one thing the bridesmaids hadn't taken when the flowers scattered. Inside, in a waterproof pocket I'd sewn myself just this morning, was a USB drive. Such a small thing to contain so much destruction. "For the past 3 months," I said, holding it up for everyone to see, "I've been documenting everything. Every threatening text message you sent and then deleted. Every controlling email about what I should wear, who I should see, how I should act. Every instance of you tracking my location, monitoring my calls, isolating me from anyone who might help me see the truth." Marcus's face had gone from pale to gray. "You're lying. You're making this up because you're angry. Am I?" I looked out at the crowd, at all the phones still recording. This drive contained screenshots, videos, audio recordings. 3 months of evidence, backed up in multiple locations. Copies already sent to several trusted individuals with instructions to release them publicly if anything happens to me. I'd learned that from my work in event planning. Always have a backup plan. And always protect your assets. In this case, the asset was my life, my freedom, my future. You see, Marcus, you taught me something important. You taught me to think strategically, to plan ahead, to never let anyone see your real moves until it's too late for them to counter. I smiled again, colder this time. You just never imagined I'd learn those lessons well enough to use them against you. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 300 people watching the perfect society wedding transform into something else entirely. I could see the calculation happening on faces throughout the crowd. Who had business with Marcus? Who might be implicated by association? Who was already planning how to distance themselves? The assault we all just witnessed? I continued, my voice steady despite the throbbing in my face. That's assault and battery. On video. Dozens of videos, actually. Thank you all for being such dedicated documentarians. I nodded to the crowd, several of whom looked simultaneously guilty and fascinated. Marcus finally found his voice, but it came out strangled. "Claire, we can fix this. Whatever you think happened, whatever you think you know, we can work through it. Don't throw away everything we have because of one mistake." One mistake? My laugh was sharp enough to cut. Marcus, you didn't make one mistake. You made thousands. You just never thought you'd have to pay for them. I turned to Reverend Matthews, who looked completely lost. I don't think we'll be needing your services today, Reverend, though I may need you to testify about what you witnessed. Then to my father, who had tears in his eyes. Dad, can you call Detective Morrison? The one from your poker group? Tell him I need to file a police report. Claire Bear, of course. Right away. He pulled out his phone, his hand shaking, to my mother, who was staring at me like I'd become a stranger. Mom, I know this isn't the wedding you planned. I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry for choosing myself over your social ambitions. And finally, to Marcus, who stood there in his perfect tuxedo with his perfect life imploding around him. You wanted to know what I'm capable of? This is just the beginning. By tomorrow morning, every media outlet in Chicago will have access to the evidence I've compiled. Every business partner you have will see the real Marcus Thorne. Every charity board you sit on will be faced with proof of who you really are. You can't do this, he said, but there was no conviction in it. He knew I could. He knew I would. I already have. The press releases are scheduled to send at 8 tomorrow morning. But don't worry, I'm sure your lawyers are very good. They'll need to be. I bent down, gathered what remained of my bouquet, and walked back down the aisle I'd just walked up. But this time I wasn't being given away. I was taking myself back. The crowd parted before me like water, everyone instinctively drawing back from the blood-stained bride who'd just destroyed Chicago's golden boy in front of everyone who mattered. I could feel their eyes on me, their phones still recording, capturing every moment of my transformation from victim to victor. Rachel met me at the back of the ballroom, her face fierce with pride and tears. I have your bag. And the car. Let's get you out of here. Wait! I turned back one last time, my voice carrying through the silent hall. Oh, and Marcus? The business you started last month? The one you've been building with my client contacts? My industry relationships? My reputation? The one you made me sign over 51% of to you for tax purposes? His face told me he suddenly understood where this was going. I've been documenting that too. Every client you stole, every relationship you exploited, every lie you told using my name. My lawyers have a very interesting case for fraud, intellectual property theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. They're particularly excited about the parts where you forged my signature on several documents. I hadn't forged anything, of course, but I'd been careful, meticulous, making sure I had proof of every signature I'd been coerced or manipulated into making. My lawyer, the real one, not the one Marcus had recommended, had been building the case for weeks. By the time this is over, I continued, you won't just lose your reputation. You'll lose your business, your assets, and possibly your freedom. But you'll still have one thing. What's that? The question came out barely above a whisper. The knowledge that you did this to yourself. That if you'd just let me be an equal partner instead of a possession, if you'd treated me with basic human respect, none of this would be happening. You destroyed us, Marcus. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. With that, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, out of the Meridian Grand, out of the life I'd almost resigned myself to living. Rachel wrapped her arm around me, supporting me even as I held my head high. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of sound as 300 guests all started talking at once, their phones buzzing with texts and social media posts. By tonight, everyone in Chicago would know what happened at Marcus Thorne's wedding. By tomorrow, it would be national news. The afternoon sun was brutally bright after the dim grandeur of the ballroom. I squinted against it, tasting blood and freedom in equal measure. My face throbbed. My dress was ruined. My life as I'd known it was over, and I had never felt more alive. Rachel guided me to her car, a sensible Honda that had never tried to be something it wasn't. As we pulled away from the Meridian Grand, I caught a glimpse of myself in the side mirror. Blood on my chin, mascara smeared, a red mark blooming across my cheek that would definitely become a spectacular bruise. I looked like I'd been in a war I had been. And I'd just fired the opening. Shot in what would become Marcus Thorne's complete destruction. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Detective Morrison. Your father called. I'm taking this case personally. When you're ready, I have a lot of questions. But for now, get somewhere safe. Well done, Ms. Hartley, very well done. Rachel glanced over at me. Where to? I considered. Not my apartment. That was half Marcus's by now, filled with his things and his surveillance. Not my parents' house. That would be the first place he'd look. I needed somewhere he wouldn't think to find me, somewhere I could regroup and plan my next moves. Sarah's place, I said finally. My college roommate, one of the friends Marcus had convinced me to distance myself from. The one who'd tried to warn me a year ago and who I'd pushed away. If she'll have me. She will, Rachel said with certainty. I may have already texted her. She's expecting us. Of course she was, because Rachel had been planning this escape route long before I'd been ready to take it. My sister, always 2 steps ahead, always preparing for the disaster she'd seen coming. As we drove through Chicago's streets, past the life I was leaving behind, I felt something unexpected. Not fear or regret, but anticipation. Because Marcus Thorne had spent 2 years teaching me about power, how to recognize it, how to wield it, how to hide it beneath a veneer of compliance. He'd just never imagined I'd been taking notes. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number I recognized. My lawyer, Catherine Chen, the shark I'd secretly retained 3 months ago when I'd finally admitted to myself that this relationship was unfixable. Saw the video. Multiple witnesses already calling. This is even better than we'd hoped. Don't talk to anyone except law enforcement. I'm drafting restraining order now. You're going to be fine, Claire. More than fine. I leaned back against the seat, closed my eyes, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd just done. In the span of 20 minutes, I'd gone from almost bride to the woman who'd destroyed Chicago's golden boy. By this time tomorrow, I'd be infamous. The whispers would start. Gold digger, attention seeker, manipulator. They always blamed the woman, always found ways to make it her fault. But I had something they didn't expect. Evidence. Mountains of it. Documented, verified, incontrovertible. And more than that, I had rage channeled into purpose, fear transformed into strategy, and every lesson Marcus had taught me about playing the long game. He'd wanted to own me. Instead, he'd armed me. The biggest mistake of his life. Rachel's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then at me. It's Mom. Don't answer. Not yet. She's calling on repeat, Claire. She's probably losing her mind. She can lose it for a few more hours. I need time to think. But Rachel's phone kept ringing, followed by mine. Texts pouring in, from family, from friends I hadn't spoken to in months, from colleagues and acquaintances and people I'd met exactly once at networking events. Everyone wanting answers, wanting to know if the videos were real, if I was okay, if I needed help. Where were they 6 months ago when I'd started pulling away? Where were they when I'd canceled lunch dates and missed birthdays and slowly disappeared from my own life? But that was unfair. I'd hidden it well, wearing Marcus's diamond collar with a smile, pretending everything was perfect because admitting otherwise felt like admitting failure. They hadn't known because I hadn't let them know. That ended today. We pulled up outside, Sarah's apartment building, a modest walk-up in Lincoln Park that had once been my second home. I hadn't been here in over a year, not since Marcus had insisted, that Sarah wasn't good for my growth. Sarah was waiting outside, and the moment she saw me through the car window, her face crumpled. She yanked open the door before Rachel had even fully stopped, pulling me into a hug that made my battered face throb, but also made something tight in my chest finally loosen. You magnificent disaster, she whispered fiercely. I'm so proud of you, I could scream. Come on, let's get you inside before the media circus finds you. Too late. A news van was already pulling up down the street. A reporter I vaguely recognized from local television jumping out with predatory eagerness. Move, Rachel commanded. And we did, practically running into the building as the reporter shouted questions behind us. Sarah's apartment was exactly as I remembered, cluttered in a lived-in way, smelling of coffee and vanilla candles, walls covered with framed photos of adventures and friends and life fully lived. The life I'd been systematically extracted from. "Bathroom first," Sarah said. "All business. We need to document that bruise properly, clean you up, and then you're going to sit down and tell me everything." An hour later, I was cleaned up, photographed from every angle for evidence, and wrapped in Sarah's softest bathrobe with an ice pack pressed to my face. Rachel had gone to my apartment, with my father as backup, to collect essential items. Sarah sat across from me, her laptop open, already organizing the chaos that was about to become my life. "Okay," she said. "Talk to me. The planning, the evidence, the timing, this wasn't spontaneous. How long have you been preparing?" 3 months, I admitted. "That's when I found the burner phone." "The what?" "Marcus has a second phone. I found it hidden in his office at home. At first, I thought he was having an affair, which honestly would have been a relief. A clean reason to leave. But it wasn't that. What was it?" I took a breath, remembering the sick feeling when I'd scrolled through those messages. He was sabotaging me, sending emails from fake accounts to my clients, subtle things that made me look unprofessional, unreliable, telling them I was having personal problems, that I might not be able to deliver on contracts. And then he'd swoop in, all concern and support, offering to handle things through his connections. Sarah's face had gone very still. "He was destroying your career, systematically, while pretending to build it up. Every client I thought he'd help me land, he'd actually been undermining me with my existing clients first, making me desperate enough to accept his help. Which always came with strings, controlling strings. That's not just abuse, Claire. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. She paused, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "That's dozens of criminal charges." "I know." Catherine, my lawyer, confirmed it. That's when I started documenting everything. Every controlling text, every instance of him tracking my location, every time he suggested I cancel plans or change my appearance or distance myself from someone. I even set up hidden cameras in my own home. Jesus, Claire, I needed irrefutable evidence. Because I knew when I left, he'd try to destroy me. And I knew he'd be good at it. He's had practice. I paused, remembering something else I'd found. "He's done this before." "What?" "There was another woman, before me." I found court records, sealed, but my investigator managed to get details. She filed a restraining order against him 5 years ago, claimed abuse, stalking, financial manipulation. But Marcus's family buried it, paid her off, made it disappear. She moved to California and hasn't spoken publicly about it since. Sarah was typing frantically. "Do you have her contact information?" "Catherine does. We've already reached out. She's considering whether she's ready to come forward. Her NDA expires next month." "Convenient timing." "Not really. I timed my wedding around it." I smiled grimly. If I'd called it off quietly, Marcus would have destroyed me in the press, used his connections to blackball me in the industry, made sure I never worked in Chicago again. But if I did it publicly, spectacularly, with enough witnesses and evidence that he couldn't spin his way out of it, you'd control the narrative. Exactly. And with his ex potentially ready to speak out, with my evidence, with 300 witnesses to his assault, with everything documented and backed up and ready to release, he can't hide anymore. His mother can't buy this away. His lawyers can't seal it. This is public, permanent, and devastating. Sarah leaned back, studying me with something like awe. "When did you get so ruthless?" "When I realized being nice was killing me." I touched the ice pack to my face, wincing. Marcus taught me that power respects only power, that people only value what they can't control. He spent 2 years trying to break me down into something small and manageable and grateful for his attention. Instead, he taught you how to fight back. He taught me how he thinks, how men like him operate, the strategies they use, the weaknesses they try to hide. And then I used all of it against him. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my heart race. Ms. Hartley, this is Jennifer Nakamura from the Chicago Tribune. I'd like to speak with you about your story. I promise fair coverage. My sister went through something similar. I'll make sure people hear the truth. I showed the message to Sarah. This could be your chance to tell your side before Marcus controls the narrative, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. Jennifer Nakamura is good. She did that series on domestic violence in wealthy communities last year. She won't sensationalize it. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 24 hours ago, the thought of going public would have terrified me. But that was before Marcus had slapped me in front of everyone who mattered in his world. That was before I'd watched his mask shatter in real time. Set up the interview, I said, for tomorrow morning. I want the story out before his lawyers can craft their defense. Sarah nodded, already typing. My phone buzzed again. Catherine Chen, my lawyer. Claire, don't talk to press yet. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. 6 a.m. We need to prep you properly. Detective Morrison will be there too. This is going exactly as we planned, but we need to be careful. Marcus's family has serious resources. As we planned. The words settled over me with grim satisfaction. Because this wasn't impulse or breakdown or hysteria, no matter what Marcus would try to claim. This was strategy, executed with precision timing that would make a military general proud. I need to tell you something, I said to Sarah, who was still working on her laptop. Something I haven't told anyone except Catherine and my investigator. She looked up, concerned. What? The USB drive I showed everyone? The one with 3 months of evidence? Yeah? I've been documenting for longer than 3 months. Try 18 months. Sarah's mouth fell open. 18? You've been planning this for a year and a half? Not exactly. At first I was just keeping records. Little things that bothered me, but I wasn't sure why. Screenshots of weird texts. Notes about arguments. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was the problem. But I kept the documentation anyway, just in case. When did you realize you needed to get out? I closed my eyes, remembering the moment everything crystallized. 8 months ago. We were at a charity gala. Marcus had been drinking, and I laughed at something one of his colleagues said. Just laughed. When we got home, he cornered me in the bedroom and told me I'd humiliated him, that I was flirting, making him look weak. And then he grabbed my throat. Sarah made a small, hurt sound. He didn't squeeze hard enough to leave marks. He was very careful about that. But his face. Sarah, his face was so cold, so controlled, and I realized this wasn't about anger or losing control. This was about power. About showing me what he could do if I ever challenged him. That's when you hired Catherine. That's when I started planning my escape. But I knew if I just left, he'd destroy me. His family has connections everywhere. His mother sits on half the boards in Chicago. He could have me blacklisted from every venue, every client, every opportunity. And he would, because leaving him would be the ultimate challenge to his control. So, you decided to burn it all down instead. I decided to make it impossible for him to spin the narrative, to create such public, undeniable evidence that his family's money and influence couldn't bury it, to turn his own world against him using his own actions. My phone rang. Dad. Claire Bear, I'm at your apartment with Rachel. We've got 3 suitcases of your things. But there's something you should know. Marcus showed up. My blood went cold. Is Rachel okay? She's fine. I didn't let him near her. But Claire, he's not handling this well. He tried to convince me this was all a misunderstanding, that you'd been acting erratically, that he was worried about your mental health. When I didn't buy it, he got threatening, said his lawyers would destroy you, that you'd regret humiliating him. Did you record it? Every word. I thought you might need it. I smiled despite the throbbing in my face. My father, the pragmatic accountant who'd taught me to keep receipts and document everything. You're the best dad. No, Claire Bear. You are. What you did today took courage I didn't know you had. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. I should have. Dad, stop. You're helping now. That's what matters. After we hung up, Sarah's laptop chimed with an incoming email. Her face went pale as she read it. Claire, you need to see this. She turned the screen toward me. It was from an anonymous email address, but the subject line was clear. You're not his first victim. The message contained a link to a private document, testimony from 3 other women who'd dated Marcus over the past decade. Each story was horrifyingly similar to mine. The charming beginning, the gradual isolation, the psychological manipulation, the threats when they tried to leave. And in 2 cases, restraining orders that had been quietly settled and sealed. How did they find you? Sarah asked. Catherine must have put out feelers through legal channels. She said if there were other victims, this was our chance to give them a voice. I scrolled through the testimonies, my stomach churning. He's been doing this for years, destroying women and moving on, protected by his family's money and reputation. Not anymore. Not anymore, I agreed. The next 12 hours passed in a blur. Detective Morrison came to Sarah's apartment at midnight, took my statement, photographed my injuries, and collected the physical evidence I'd compiled. He was a gruff man in his 50s, but his eyes softened when I told him about the choking incident. My daughter went through something similar, he said quietly. Her husband put her in the hospital before she finally pressed charges. Seeing, you stand up for yourself today. You might have saved other women from going through what you did. Or I might have just made myself a target. That's why I'm going to personally make sure the restraining order is ironclad, and why I'm assigning protection detail to you and your family until Marcus Thorne is processed and charged. Men like him don't handle public humiliation well. He was right to be concerned. By morning, my phone was flooded with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Most were supportive, but some were vicious. Gold digger, attention whore, crazy bitch who ruined a good man's life. The misogyny was predictable, but still stunning in its cruelty. But for every hateful message, there were 3 more offering support. Women sharing their own stories of abuse. Men apologizing for times they'd dismissed warning signs. Domestic violence organizations reaching out with resources and requesting to partner on awareness campaigns. I'd become a symbol overnight, the bride who fought back. At 6 a.m., I walked into Catherine Chen's downtown office with Rachel and Sarah flanking me like bodyguards. Catherine was already there, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, her war room of legal documents spread across a massive conference table. Good morning, Ms. Hartley, she said with a sharp smile. Ready to destroy a man's life? He destroyed his own life. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. Detective Morrison arrived moments later with news. We've arrested Marcus Thorne on charges of assault and battery. He made bail an hour ago. His mother posted it. But here's the interesting part. When we searched his home office, we found the burner phone you mentioned. And several others. Claire, he's been monitoring multiple women. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Stalking apps, GPS trackers, spyware on their phones and computers. Some of them are ex-girlfriends. Some are colleagues. One is his own sister. Catherine's expression hardened. That's illegal wiretapping, stalking, invasion of privacy. We're talking federal charges now. His lawyers are already working damage control, Morrison continued. They're claiming you provoked him, that he acted in a moment of stress, that he's willing to enter anger management and make restitution. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I'm not settling. I'm not accepting an apology. I want every charge prosecuted to the fullest extent of law. That's what I wanted to hear. Catherine pulled out a thick folder. Because I've been busy. Your documentation was extraordinary, but I found more. Financial records showing Marcus has been siphoning money from joint accounts you didn't know existed. Contracts he signed in your name without authorization. And most damning, communications with his previous victims, explicitly threatening them into silence. Can we use that? With their permission, yes. And I've spoken with 2 of them this morning. They're ready to testify. Your courage yesterday gave them courage. The interview with Jennifer Nakamura happened at 8 a.m. in Catherine's conference room. The journalist was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed and direct, with a recording device and a notebook filled with preliminary research. Ms. Hartley, thank you for speaking with me. I know this must be incredibly difficult. Call me Claire. And it's not difficult anymore. It's necessary. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The gradual isolation, the financial manipulation, the surveillance and control, the escalating psychological abuse that had nearly convinced me I was the problem. I showed her the evidence, screenshots, recordings, the testimony from other victims. I let her photograph my bruised face, the fingerprint marks on my wrist from last week that I'd finally stopped hiding. Why did you wait until the wedding? Jennifer asked. Why not leave sooner? Because leaving quietly would have given him the power to control the narrative. His family would have buried it, paid me off, made me sign an NDA, and moved on to the next victim. By doing it publicly, with witnesses, with evidence too extensive to dismiss, I took that power away from him. Some people are saying you planned this, that you manipulated the situation to humiliate him. I met her eyes steadily. I documented his abuse. I collected evidence of his crimes. I protected myself the only way I could. If he feels humiliated, it's because his own actions were exposed, not because I manipulated anything. He hit me in front of 300 people. That was his choice, not mine. What do you want to happen now? I want him prosecuted. I want his other victims to feel safe coming forward. I want people to understand that abuse in wealthy, educated communities is just as real and dangerous as anywhere else. And I want other women in my situation to know they can fight back. The article went live at noon. By 1 p.m., it had been shared 50,000 times. By 3 p.m., every major news outlet in the country was covering the story. The wedding videos had gone viral, viewed millions of times, with the hashtag Claire's wedding trending worldwide. Marcus's world collapsed in real time. His business partners released a statement distancing themselves from him. 3 major clients pulled their contracts. His mother resigned from 2 charity boards preemptively. The athletic club where he networked revoked his membership. His friends, those performative allies who'd laughed at his jokes about my unemployment, suddenly couldn't remember his phone number, and the other victims started coming forward. By evening, 7 women had publicly shared their stories of dating Marcus Thorne. The pattern was undeniable, the evidence overwhelming. What had started as my personal stand against one abuser had become a movement, a reckoning, a public dissection of how wealthy, charismatic men use their privilege to harm women with impunity. Claire, you need to see this, Sarah said, pulling up a news broadcast. Patricia Thorne, Marcus's formidable mother, was giving a press conference. I expected her to defend him, to use her influence to attack me. Instead, her face was drawn, aged a decade in a single day. I want to apologize, she said, her voice breaking, to Claire Hartley and to every woman my son has hurt. I was aware of concerning behavior over the years. I chose to excuse it, to cover it, to enable it because he was my son and I couldn't accept what he was becoming. My actions protected a predator and endangered innocent women. I will be cooperating fully with law enforcement and establishing a foundation to support domestic violence victims. It's the least I can do to atone for my failures. I sat back, stunned. Patricia Thorne, the ice queen of Chicago society, had just publicly admitted her son was an abuser. The fortress Marcus had relied on for protection had crumbled from within. His own mother just threw him under the bus, Rachel breathed. No, I said slowly. She's finally telling the truth. That takes courage. My phone rang. Marcus's number. Against my better judgment, I answered on speaker with Catherine present. Claire. His voice was raw, desperate. Please, you have to make this stop. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. No. I'll give you anything. The business, money, whatever you want. Just please, call off your lawyers. Tell the press you exaggerated. Marcus, I'm not going to save you from the consequences of your own actions. I loved you. The desperation cracked into rage. I gave you everything.
I made you somebody.
You isolated me. You controlled me. You hit me. That's not love, Marcus. That's ownership. And I'm done being owned. You think you've won? You think destroying me makes you strong? You're nothing without me, Claire. Nothing. Catherine leaned toward the phone. Mr. Thorne, this is Catherine Chen, Ms. Hartley's attorney. This call is being recorded and will be submitted as evidence of harassment and witness intimidation. I strongly suggest you contact your own legal representation and cease all communication with my client. The line went dead. Well, Catherine said with satisfaction, that should add nicely to the restraining order violation we're filing. The next few weeks were brutal. Marcus's legal team tried everything. Character assassination, leaked emails taken out of context, claims that I'd been scheming to steal his money all along. But every attack was countered by evidence, by testimony from other victims, by the undeniable video of him hitting me at our wedding. The preliminary hearing was swift. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and no patience for legal theatrics, reviewed the evidence and set bail conditions that essentially placed Marcus under house arrest with electronic monitoring. Mr. Thorne, she said coldly, you are to have no contact with Ms. Hartley or any of the other alleged victims. You are not to leave your residence except for legal appointments and court appearances. Given the wealth of evidence against you and the number of complainants, I consider you a significant flight risk and a danger to the community. Marcus's face as he was let out, monitored ankle bracelet in place, was the face of a man who'd finally realized he wasn't untouchable. 3 months later, I sat in a different courtroom for the trial. 8 women testified against Marcus, their stories forming an undeniable pattern of predatory behavior. The evidence was overwhelming: surveillance equipment, threatening communications, financial fraud, assault. I was the last to testify. As I walked to the stand, I felt the weight of every woman who'd been silenced, every victim who'd been paid off and hidden away. This was for all of us. Ms. Hartley, the prosecutor said gently, can you tell the court what happened on June 15th at your wedding? I told them. Every detail, every moment, every calculation that had gone into surviving and escaping a man who'd tried to erase me. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, except Marcus's. He stared at me with cold hatred, and I stared back without flinching. I wasn't his victim anymore. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: assault, stalking, fraud, illegal surveillance, witness intimidation. When the verdict was read, Marcus showed no emotion, but his hands were shaking. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison, with additional penalties for the financial crimes. His law license was revoked. His assets were frozen pending civil suits from his victims. The Thorne family empire, built over generations, was irrevocably tarnished. Outside the courthouse, I gave one final statement to the press. Justice today isn't just for me. It's for every woman who's been told she's overreacting, that abuse in a nice suit is somehow less dangerous, that leaving means losing everything. I'm here to say you can fight back. You can win, and you don't have to do it alone. The crowd erupted in applause. I saw women crying, holding signs that said, I stand with Claire and we're survivors united. What had started as my personal horror story had become something bigger, a conversation, a movement, a refusal to let abusers hide behind wealth and charm. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my new office, Claire Hartley Events, my company, solely mine, built on my terms with my vision. The past year had been the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I'd faced my abuser, exposed his crimes, and reclaimed my life piece by piece. Sarah walked in with coffee and a knowing smile. Big day. First celebrity wedding since you became famous. Infamous, you mean. Tomato. The point is, you're booked solid for the next 2 years. Apparently, every woman in America wants the woman who destroyed Marcus Thorne planning their wedding. I laughed. It felt good. genuine in a way laughter hadn't felt in years. Let's hope their weddings go better than mine did. My phone buzzed. A message from Patricia Thorne, who I'd been cautiously communicating with as she worked to make amends. Claire wanted you to know, the foundation just funded its 100th domestic violence shelter. None of this would have happened without your courage. Thank you for saving my son's future victims. I'm sorry I couldn't save his past ones. I showed it to Sarah. She's trying. More than trying. She's actually doing something. Rachel burst in, waving her phone. Turn on the news. Right now, we did. The anchor was announcing breaking news. Marcus Thorne, currently serving time for multiple counts of assault and fraud, has been charged with additional crimes after prison officials discovered he was attempting to organize harassment campaigns against his victims from behind bars. This new charge could add years to his sentence. He can't help himself, Sarah said. Even in prison, he has to try to control things. Good, I said firmly. Let him keep digging his own grave. The deeper he goes, the safer we all are. That evening, I sat on my new apartment balcony, a beautiful space in a building Marcus had never set foot in, paid for entirely by my thriving business. The city lights spread out before me, full of possibility instead of threat. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but I'd learned to be cautious. Hello? Ms. Hartley? This is Amanda Chen. You don't know me, but I just left my husband after 15 years of abuse. I saw what you did, how you fought back, and I realized I could too. I'm calling to say thank you. You saved my life. I closed my eyes, feeling tears I hadn't expected. Amanda, you saved your own life. I just showed you it was possible. Still, thank you. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. So afraid, so convinced she had to accept cruelty as the price of security. That woman would barely recognize me now. I'd lost things, my naivety, my trust in appearances, my belief that love alone was enough. But I'd gained so much more. My strength, my voice, my absolute certainty that I would never again let anyone make me small. The wedding that never was had become my liberation. The slap that should have broken me had instead shattered every chain Marcus had spent 2 years wrapping around me. And the words I'd spoken, the truth I'd finally voiced in front of 300 witnesses, had not just ruined him, they'd freed me. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Catherine. Civil suit settled. Marcus's remaining assets being distributed to his victims per the agreement. Your portion alone is enough to fund your business expansion and then some. Congratulations, Claire. You didn't just survive. You won. I smiled, looking out at my city, my future, my life reclaimed and rebuilt on my own terms. Marcus Thorne had tried to own me, to break me, to erase everything I was and replace it with his vision of what I should be. Instead, I'd taken everything he'd taught me about power and strategy and ruthlessness, and I'd used it to expose him, prosecute him, and ensure he could never hurt anyone again. He'd wanted to make me nothing. I'd made myself everything he'd never be, honest, accountable, and genuinely strong. And as I sat there in my freedom, in my truth, in my hard-won peace, I realized something profound. The best revenge wasn't destroying Marcus Thorne. The best revenge was building a life so authentic, so purposeful, so completely mine that he became nothing more than a cautionary tale in my origin story. A chapter I'd closed, a lesson I'd learned, a monster I'd defeated. And now? Now I was just beginning. The lights of Chicago twinkled below like promises waiting to be kept. Tomorrow I'd plan someone else's perfect wedding. Next week, I'd speak at a domestic violence awareness event. Next month, I'd mentor 3 young women trying to escape abusive relationships. But tonight, I sat with myself, scarred but unbroken, damaged but healing, forever changed but finally, completely free. And that was the truest happy ending I could have asked for. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.